The gravel road vanished long before the last light did. By the time I reached the cabin, only the forest remained, silent, ancient, and strangely alert. The air felt dense, as if every pine needle carried weight. I cut the engine, and the world fell into complete stillness. Somewhere out there, between the trees, a faint whisper stirred. It wasn't wind. It was softer, slower, deliberate, like a voice testing its first word. My hand hovered near the lantern, the wick trembling in its glass dome. I thought I came here to escape the noise of life, but now I would give anything to hear something familiar. Even the hum of a highway or a passing train. Then again, the whisper came, closer this time, and unmistakably human. Inside, the air felt colder than outside. Dust hung suspended in narrow beams of lantern light, and the smell of pine rot clung to every surface. The wooden walls seemed to groan as if remembering something. I ran my hand along the counter, stirring up years of neglect. Then I saw them. Old photographs on the mantel. A family, smiling. The same cabin behind them. The edges of the pictures were warped. The colors faded, but their eyes were sharp. They seemed to look straight through me. Somewhere behind the walls, a floorboard creaked. Then, silence again. Thick, absolute. The generator coughed to life outside, its buzz slicing through the quiet. I felt safer with the light on, though it flickered uncertainly, painting the walls in nervous rhythm. Then I noticed them. Wet footprints trailing from the front door to the center of the room. My stomach dropped. I hadn't been outside since I arrived. The prints stopped suddenly, mid-stride, vanishing into nothing. The sound of the generator faltered, then choked into silence. The light bulb above me popped. I was in darkness again. The forest had gone quiet again. Not peaceful, dead quiet. I opened the window just enough to listen, and for a moment I heard nothing but my heartbeat. Then came a murmur, low, steady, almost rhythmic. Not the wind, not the generator's echo, but something living, chanting from the woods. The words were lost to the distance, yet the tone was unmistakable. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. When I closed the window, the knocking began. Soft at first, a single tap, then again harder. I froze, shotgun in hand, waiting for it to stop. It didn't. The knocks moved along the wall, circling the cabin like something tracing the perimeter. Then a scraping sound on the glass. I turned the flashlight toward the window. A wet handprint. Fresh. The breath caught in my throat. The light flickered, and when it steadied again, the print was gone. Morning arrived, pale and thin, sunlight weak against the fog that still clung to the trees. The air felt wrong. Too still, too heavy. Like the night hadn't really ended. I stepped outside, the boards creaking beneath my weight. The forest was quiet, but it wasn't empty. I could feel eyes on me, though the woods revealed nothing. The generator sat silent, half buried in dew. When I crouched beside it, I saw something scratched into its metal casing. 5 symbols. Crude and deliberate. Not letters. Not random. They looked burned in. I brushed the frost away, and for a moment, the shapes seemed to pulse. My stomach turned cold. Something wanted me to notice. Inside, I brewed instant coffee and tried to shake the feeling from my skin. Every sound seemed too sharp. The drip from the sink, the hum of the kettle. I sat at the small wooden table and opened my journal, meaning to write something ordinary, something to remind me this place was real. But when I turned to the first page, my handwriting was already there. Dozens of lines I didn't remember writing. Each one said the same thing. It knows you're here. By midday, the fog refused to lift. I tried to walk the property line, but the forest twisted on itself, leading me in circles. Every direction looked the same. Wet moss, tall trees, no end in sight. I marked trunks with red paint, When I returned to where I started, the marks were gone. The air tasted metallic, like lightning before a storm. Then I heard it again. That same whisper, softer now, calling from deeper in. I should have turned back. Instead, I followed. The woods opened into a clearing I hadn't seen before. At its center stood a stone circle, half buried under moss and vines. Old carvings spiraled across their surfaces, the same symbols from the generator. The ground was cold, slick, and when I stepped closer, I noticed the air shimmer, as if heat rose from the soil despite the chill. Then, from nowhere, the wind picked up, swirling through the clearing in tight, unnatural circles. It carried a voice I couldn't deny this time. A woman's voice, soft and pleading. By dusk, I made it back to the cabin. Mud streaked up my legs, the whisper still echoing in my head. I locked every door and window, but the sound didn't stop. It came from the floorboards now, rising through the gaps. Soft, rhythmic tapping, like footsteps below the house. I dropped to my knees, pressing my ear against the wood. The voice that answered wasn't far away. It was right beneath me, speaking my name as if it had always known it. Sleep never came. Every creak of the cabin felt intentional, like footsteps circling my thoughts. By dawn, my nerves were frayed, my breath shallow. I tore the rug from the floor and found a hatch. Square, iron sealed with rust. It hadn't been visible before, though I'd walked that same patch a dozen times. My hand hovered over the latch, trembling. A faint draft seeped through the seams, cold and damp, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and rot. Something had been living, or waiting, down there. I should have walked away. But curiosity always wins before fear does. I pried the hatch open with a crowbar, the metal groaning like something alive. A waft of cold air surged upward, damp and old, thick with the smell of soil. My lantern barely pierced the dark stairwell beneath, wooden steps descending into blackness. I told myself I'd just take a quick look, just enough to know. But as soon as I stepped down, the air changed. It felt heavier, almost electric. The walls seemed to close in, covered in faint carvings. The same symbols again, etched into the wood like claw marks. At the bottom, the air was still and thick. The cellar stretched wider than the cabin above, its walls slick with moisture. Old furniture, half decayed, lay scattered. A rocking chair, a broken mirror, a child's toy covered in dust. My light caught on something farther back, a shape crouched against the wall. My breath hitched. It wasn't moving. Then, just as I stepped closer, its head tilted, slowly, toward me. The lantern flickered. I stumbled backward, heart pounding so violently I thought I'd collapse. The thing in the corner shifted again, dragging its hand across the dirt floor. The same sound I'd heard last night on the window glass. My shaking light found its face. Hollow eyes, mouth open, in a silent wail. For an instant it looked human. Then the light died, plunging me into absolute black. From that darkness came the sound of whispering, dozens of voices overlapping, all speaking my name in perfect unison. I scrambled up the stairs, the hatch slamming shut above me with a thunderous metallic crack. The sound echoed through the cabin long after I'd bolted it shut. My pulse felt detached, beating in my ears instead of my chest. The whispers continued from below, rising and falling like a chant. I dragged furniture over the hatch, every breath shallow and jagged. Then came the final sound, a single knock from beneath the floorboards, steady and slow, followed by silence. Not peace, just the kind that means something is waiting. I didn't sleep that night. The whispers stopped just before dawn, but the silence left in their wake felt worse, heavy, knowing. I sat at the kitchen table, tracing the burned symbols in my memory, trying to make sense of them. Something about them gnawed at me like half-remembered words from a forgotten language. I searched the shelves, dusty with neglect, until I found a stack of old journals buried behind canned goods. The handwriting was erratic, looping with panic. One entry caught my eye. It lives beneath. It wears our voices until we answer. My throat tightened. Someone before me had heard the same thing. The entries stretched back decades. One name appeared over and over. Hollow Creek Lodge. This place had a name before it was mine. Each writer described the same pattern. Voices in the woods, symbols appearing near dawn, and the feeling of being studied. The last entry ended abruptly, the ink smeared as if the hand that wrote it had been snatched mid-sentence. I slammed the journal shut. Every instinct told me to leave. But when I looked out the window, the fog had thickened again, swallowing the path entirely. Even the truck looked half dissolved. The woods didn't want me to go. By noon, the whispers had turned to soft laughter, faint, distant, and wrong. It came from every direction, weaving through the trees like invisible threads. I grabbed the journals and stepped outside, determined to burn them, to cut the connection. The fire caught quickly, the dry paper curling black in seconds. But the smoke didn't rise. It fell, curling downward into the soil. The laughter grew louder. My vision blurred for a moment, and in the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A figure standing just beyond the tree line, still as stone. I stumbled back inside and bolted the door, my hands shaking. The voices were no longer whispers, but full sentences now, their words blending into mine. I couldn't tell where my thoughts ended and theirs began. The air grew colder. Frost spread across the inside of the windows. I reached for the radio on the counter, an old shortwave model left behind by the previous owner. Static. Then a voice, faint but clear. "Don't look under the floor." The message repeated, identical every time. I tore the plug from the socket, heart hammering. The radio kept speaking. That night, I dreamed of the cellar. The narrow steps, the voice in the dark, and a hand reaching from the soil. When I woke, the hatch was open again. The furniture I'd piled on top had been moved aside neatly, as if by careful hands. I stared down into the black void beneath. No sound, no movement. Only the faint, rhythmic beat of dripping water. It echoed like a slow pulse. The air rising from below smelled of earth and decay, but mixed with something else. Warmth, as if whatever was down there had started breathing. The morning came gray and muted, like the world was holding its breath. The hatch gaped open in the floor, a mouth waiting for me to look inside. I told myself I'd seal it for good, maybe fill it with concrete when the fog cleared. If it ever cleared. But the whisper was louder now, closer, threading through my thoughts in perfect rhythm with my heartbeat. It didn't sound angry anymore. It sounded familiar, like something wearing my own voice. I stared into the dark until my eyes watered. Then, from the depths, a faint reply echoed, the sound of my name, spoken exactly as I would have said it. The voice lingered in my head long after it stopped. I couldn't eat, couldn't think. The cabin walls seemed closer, the corners darker than before. I tried the radio again. Silence. I picked up one of the remaining journals and found a passage I hadn't seen before. Once it learns your sound, it follows. The page was torn at the bottom, the words ending abruptly. I could feel something moving beneath the floorboards, soft, rhythmic, like the shifting of soil. Every instinct screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The air buzzed, thick, with something alive. By late afternoon, I heard the footsteps, clear this time, not from beneath, but inside. I turned slowly toward the hallway, shotgun heavy in my hands. There was nothing at first. Then the light in the corridor shifted, dimming unnaturally, as though something large was standing between me and the window. I raised the lantern. A figure stood at the far end. Tall, still, almost human. My breath caught. It wore my clothes, my face, my expression. I dropped the lantern. The figure tilted its head, mirroring the motion perfectly. The lantern shattered, plunging the cabin into darkness. I fired once, deafening, blinding, and the recoil threw me backward. When the echo died, the hallway was empty. No blood, no body, only silence and the smell of gunpowder mixing with damp wood. I reached for the fallen lantern, but it was cold, dark, lifeless. My reflection glimmered faintly in the cracked glass, but something about it was off. The eyes blinked before I did. The rest of the night blurred into noise and breath. I locked every door, but the knocks continued. Gentle, almost polite. Once, twice, 3 times, always from a different wall. The voice outside matched mine perfectly now, even down to the tremor. It called softly through the fog, asking me to open the door. The last thing I remember before the blackout was my hand on the handle, the cold metal burning against my skin. The voice whispered again, "You're already inside." I woke to daylight and silence. For a moment I thought I'd dreamt it all. The voice, the double, the knocks. But when I stood, the shotgun was gone, and the front door stood wide open. The fog had thinned, but not disappeared. It hung like a gauze curtain between the trees, moving gently as if something were breathing beneath it. My head throbbed with the echo of words I couldn't recall. I stepped outside, barefoot on cold earth. The ground damp, as though it had rained. The air smelled of metal, and beneath it all, faint but steady, I heard it. A heartbeat, not mine, pulsing from the forest. The forest had changed. Paths that once wound between familiar trees were gone, replaced by new growth. Thicker, darker. I walked until I saw the clearing again, the circle of stones now uncovered completely, as though something had cleaned them overnight. The carvings glistened wetly, pulsing in rhythm with the heartbeat. The sound grew louder, rising through my ribs until it became part of me. For an instant, I thought I saw movement within the stones. A flicker of shape, a glimmer of skin beneath the surface. I whispered my own name just to hear it aloud. The forest whispered it back. Back at the cabin, every mirror was covered. Blankets, towels, even newspapers pinned over the glass. I didn't remember doing it, but I must have. My reflection had started whispering before it spoke. I uncovered the smallest mirror, just for a second, and froze. The face staring back was mine, but not in sync. The mouth moved too slowly, the eyes too steady. It smiled. My stomach twisted. I threw the mirror across the room, shattering it. The pieces fell face up, and in every shard, my reflection still smiled. That night I dreamed again, not of the cellar, but of standing outside myself. I watched my body move around the cabin, silent and purposeful, placing the lantern on the table, closing the curtains, whispering to the walls. I tried to wake but couldn't. My body turned toward me, its expression calm, eyes hollow. It spoke without sound. "You've already traded places." When I gasped awake, the lantern was burning beside me, exactly as in the dream. The room smelled of smoke and wet earth. By the time dusk fell again, the forest and cabin had become one. The roots pressed through the floorboards, moss crept along the walls, and the air shimmered faintly with every breath I took. The whisper was no longer outside or below. It was within, layered beneath my own voice when I spoke. I tried once more to write, but the pen moved on its own. The words came easily, steady and sure. "It's awake now." The last thing I felt before the darkness closed was a hand on my shoulder, warm, familiar, mine. The air outside no longer moved. The forest stood still as glass, every branch suspended in unnatural calm. I couldn't tell how long I'd been here, hours, days, or something longer. Time had thinned. The voice no longer whispered from the woods or beneath the floor. It spoke through me now, finishing thoughts before I could. When I stepped outside, the fog parted, as if recognizing its own. The trees leaned inward, their trunks etched with those same symbols, glowing faintly like veins beneath skin. I realized then the cabin hadn't been built here. It had grown here. And now, it was finishing what it started. I followed the trail of symbols through the trees until I reached the clearing again. The stones had sunk halfway into the ground, pulsing softly like a heartbeat buried in the earth. My reflection shimmered across their surfaces, dozens of versions of me, shifting in and out of shape. They whispered together in harmony, their words layered over one another. "Let it in." The fog swirled tighter, rising like breath from an unseen mouth. When I tried to turn back, I found no path. Only more trees, identical, infinite. The forest had closed its circle. The wind began to hum, not through the trees, but through me. My pulse matched its rhythm, my breath sensing with its slow, steady cadence. I looked down at my hands and saw the same faint carvings that marked the generator and stones, tracing their way up my skin. They burned, not painfully, but with purpose, like they were remembering where they belonged. I tried to scream, but the sound that came out wasn't mine. It was layered, deep, ancient. The voice that had been calling all along. The forest shuddered once, like something exhaling after centuries of sleep. The stones cracked, light bleeding from within, spreading across the soil like veins of molten glass. I understood then what the voices meant. It wasn't trying to kill me. It was trying to replace me. The cabin, the symbols, the fog. They were all parts of it, the thing beneath, remaking itself in human form. My knees gave out as warmth flooded my body, and I felt myself divide. One part sinking into the ground, the other standing above it, still breathing, still pretending to be me. When night fell again, the cabin looked unchanged. The lights were on, the fire burned steady, and a man sat writing at the table. From the woods, the fog watched in silence. His hand moved smoothly across the page, each word written with calm precision. "It's quiet here now." He smiled faintly, his reflection blinking in the dark window pane before he did. Outside, beneath the roots, something shifted, slow, content, waiting. The voice was quiet because it didn't need to speak anymore. It already had its echo.